Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. In this episode, we're heading to Bulgaria, where the political landscape is as stable as a Jenga tower during an earthquake. Yes, while the rest of the European Union was busy electing a new European Parliament on June 9th, Bulgaria was having its 6th national election in just 3 years. It's like the country has an election loyalty card it cannot stop stamping. You might be wondering, why is Bulgaria stuck in this electoral Groundhog Day? Well, the answer lies in the fierce battle between pro-Western and pro-Russian forces. It's a political tug-of-war that's left the country unable to form a stable government. Think of it as the world's most frustrating game of musical chairs, but instead of chairs, it's governmental stability that's missing. So, without further ado, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
In the wake of Bulgaria's most recent parliamentary election, the nation finds itself yet again with a divided legislature. The center-right Citizens for European Development of Bulgaria GRB party, led by former Prime Minister Boyko Borisov, emerged as the frontrunner. The victory, however, is bittersweet, as the party lacks a clear majority to form a government on its own.
I don't see how a government can be made. We can't do it only with the Turkish minority party MRF, so the math does not match.
GRB secured 23% of the vote, necessitating the formation of a coalition with at least 2 other parties to govern effectively. The Movement for Rights and Freedoms MRF, representing the ethnic Turkish minority, and the pro-Western We Continue the Change PP bloc are in a tight race for second place.
People deserve a new beginning. It's time to form a stable government and not have so many elections, as this hinders the normal functioning of the state. You see what the cycle of interim governments over the past 2 years has led to.
This election marks Bulgaria's 6th in 3 years and reflects the ongoing political instability that has gripped the country. The previous coalition, which included GRB and PP, collapsed after just 9 months due to disagreements over judicial reforms, among other issues. The low voter turnout, the lowest since the fall of communism at just 30%, underscores the growing public disillusionment with the political process. Many Bulgarians, wary of the constant electoral cycle, yearn for stability and progress.
And now let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. Let's break down the latest results because it's a doozy. 7 political parties have made it into the 50th Bulgarian parliament, most of whom were already present in the 49th. Leading the pack is GRB, a conservative and Euro-Atlanticist party with 68 seats. Now, this party, led by the controversial Boyko Borisov, was part of the previous government coalition. Hot on their heels is the DPS, Movement for Rights and Freedom, with 45 seats, a centrist party led by an oligarch who also supported the previous coalition. On election day, Borisov didn't waste any time announcing to journalists that GRB would form a coalition with DPS. Bold move, but there's a slight hitch. They're short by at least 8 votes. It's like promising a cake at a party, but realizing that you're out of flour. However, those who haven't been following the domestic political scene in Bulgaria may not know why Boyko Borisov is a controversial figure. For starters, he has faced numerous allegations of corruption during his tenure as prime minister. These include allegations of involvement in graft, misuse of public funds, and connection with organized crime. Critics also argue that Borisov have exhibited autocratic tendencies, with his governance style being described as centralizing power within his party and using state resources to maintain control. Under Borisov's leadership, there have been growing concerns about media freedom in Bulgaria. Borisov's government has faced significant public protests, particularly in the year 2020, when thousands of Bulgarians took to the streets demanding his resignation. His government has also maintained a complex relationship with Russia, balancing between EU and NATO commitments and historical ties with Moscow. This balancing act had sometimes drawn criticism from both pro-Western and pro-Russian factions within Bulgaria, complicating the country's foreign policy stance. Meanwhile, the pro-Western PPDB bloc is in a state of disarray. They secured 40 seats, which is 23 fewer than last time. This loss led to Hristo Ivanov, one of its leaders, resigning and refusing a parliamentary seat. Then there's the pro-Russian party Revival. they've increased their representation to 38 seats. Their leader, Konstantin Konstantinov, has made it clear that they won't support any government unless they're at the helm, the political equivalent of taking your ball and going home. So, where does this leave Bulgaria? If by some miracle the two largest political forces manage to scrape together 8 more MPs, we might see a temporary government until the end of the year. Despite the chaos, there's a silver lining for Ukraine. In summary, about 25 to 30% of Bulgarian voters backed pro-Russian parties. The political landscape remains fragmented, and the country faces continued instability. However, there is still hope for a government that supports Ukraine amidst the jigsaw puzzle that is Bulgarian politics. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Sławomir Domarewski, a political scientist from University of Warsaw. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you for the invitation.
So we are looking at the situation in Bulgaria, and first, please help us understand. The country seems to have an election every 7 minutes. What is going on over there?
Indeed, over the last 3 years, we have elections already for the 6th time. Bulgaria was, maybe still is, in a protracted political crisis stemming from the fact that people went on the streets in 2020 requesting the change of the political pattern, the way that the country is being ruled by the then Prime Minister Boyko Borisov. And why these elections that we saw last Sunday are important is because after 3 years and 6 consecutive elections, all of them snap elections, so with a lot of political turmoil, what we see today is actually a result in which the same Prime Minister, the same politician, Boyko Borisov, wins the elections as the first political party, securing himself not only the largest number of seats in the Bulgarian parliament, but also coming together with his good old political aid, the Movement for Rights and Freedoms, which became the second largest political party. And that gives them the very convenient position of being able to return to power after 3 years of political turmoil.
Right, and speaking of Boyko Borisov, he after having won the election, came out and made some announcement. Can you help us round that up, and what does that implicate?
Yes, finally, after 4 days after the elections today, Borisov for the first time spoke openly and officially, so people managed to learn that he doesn't want to be a prime minister. Because he considers this as an element of decreasing the political tensions within the country. I would say that this is a very, disputable approach, having in mind the fact that his party won the elections. But what is more important, I'm afraid, that this is in a sense a follow-up of certain political pattern that is crawling through Central and Eastern Europe, where political leaders prefer to rule from the back seat, being aware that that can spare them from the public outcry. And this formula, especially in the context of Bulgaria, might have very unfavorable consequences, but apparently this is the formula that Borisov looks for.
All right, can you help us understand that a little bit more when it comes to what you mentioned as public outcry and a phenomenon that we are increasingly observing where in Central Eastern Europe, politicians like to take a back seat instead of actually holding the helm. What has led to this sort of development?
Well, as I mentioned already, we started with this argument why people went on the streets in 2020. Borisov is a politician who has learned how to swim in 2 seas. The seas of the populist sea of national politics and the European politics sea, where he is considered and is associated with pro-Western, pro-European values. So technically, he's the good guy in Bulgaria.
A little bit of contradiction there.
Absolutely, and especially having in mind that His rule, especially the 3 consecutive terms in office from 2009 until 2020, showed numerous problems and scandals. In the literature, this is described as a state capture, what has happened in Bulgaria. So he is aware now that he's in a difficult situation for 2 reasons. On one hand, he won the elections, so he needs to take the responsibility. On the other hand, his main partner, the Movement for Rights and Freedoms, one of its two leaders, they have 2 leaders of the party, is actually sanctioned under Magnitsky Law by the United States. So how to run a pro-European, pro-Western coalition with a partner who is sanctioned by under Magnitsky Law? And on the other hand, how to manage to keep people at home, having in mind that there is a return of the well-known pattern of doing politics.
Right, and you mentioned something very key here when it comes to coalition building. That's going to be tricky in Bulgarian politics too, as we see they, even though having won the election, don't have overwhelming majority as the same as previous election cycle. So a lot of attention is actually put on whether or not they will be able to form a stable coalition going forward. Do you think that this is something that will eventually happen, or do you still see things being relatively unstable?
Well, that was the question up until now. Every next elections were producing this, I would say, even political playground in which the parties associated with Borisov and the reformist parties were more or less on an even foot, and that produced this kind of dilemma. Now this is all over. The biggest political rival for Borisov, the reformist parties, the reformist coalition, is now 3rd. What is even more, from the 7 political parties that made it to the parliament, actually the reformists are claiming that they don't want to cooperate with Borisov, which means that he has many options on the table. And if we look at pure maths, we will realize that he can even go for a minority government because he is really missing only several seats in the Bulgarian parliament, which might mean that, without any formal obligations, he would be capable of securing these votes. So in other words, Borisov is now having, together with the political win, is having also a huge problem because he knows that there is a lot of tension against him within Bulgarian society. On the other hand, he cannot pretend that nothing has happened and that Bulgaria can still stick in the political crisis as it was over the last years. That was the case when he was not able to gain the full power. Now he can do it, and whether he likes it or not, the whole blame will go on him.
All right, so this election that just took place is actually very pivotal for a whole array of reasons. We might actually see either stabilization or maybe more trouble on the hands of Mr. Borisov. But however, being as pivotal as it is, we also observe a relatively low turnout rate. Do you think that has much to do with this political fatigue? And do you think that would have an impact on the trust of this democratic system, seeing that so little people participate in it?
Absolutely. Well, the voters' turnout in Bulgaria this time, which is 34%, is the lowest turnout in parliamentary elections. There was a lot of hope that the binding of the 2 elections to the European Parliament and the parliamentary elections in one will actually contribute to the increased turnout in the European Parliament elections, which are usually even with a lower turnout in Bulgaria, but it actually turned the other way around. And the paradox is that, yes, indeed, people are absolutely fed up and tired with the Bulgarian politics. They have lost any hope and sense of credibility. The outcome is a dominant political apathy, which we see and can be felt also. And the biggest beneficiaries of this situation are the parties with the most disciplined political electorate. These are exactly Boyko Borisov's party GERB and the Movement for Rights and Freedoms, 2 parties that have a very clearly defined electorate, people who know why they're supporting them, and that had an impact on the political picture that we see today.
Right, and you were talking also about the European Parliament election, and I would like to draw a little bit of attention to that part too, because in this election cycle, we did see some more kind of nationalistic parties or more strong right-leaning parties on the rise. Do you think the same can be observed within Bulgarian politics, and will this world trend sort of change in its political parties?
We are actually seeing it. The low turnout mobilized those most determined voters, and we can see that, well, just as an example, Borisov's party in nominal terms lost almost 20% of its support in comparison to the previous elections a year ago. And now when it comes to the nationalist turn, it is also observable in Bulgaria. It's not only the pro-Russian party Revival that scored very well. It is fourth, but with a very small margin between the second, third, and fourth, literally within 2 percent points. And what is even more, the seventh party that made it to the Bulgarian parliament is an absolute newcomer. A party who can be translated as greatness, and this greatness secured it managed to go over the threshold. However, together with Revival, they constitute up to 20% of the representatives in the Bulgarian parliament. Luckily in the sense of having in mind that for the European elections there is a different threshold of 5.75%, this seventh party couldn't make it to the European Parliament. But from Bulgaria, in the next European Parliament, instead of 2 representatives of nationalist parties, we will have 3.
All right, and last but not least, I'm also wondering what this means for Bulgaria going forward. As we see, like you mentioned, we see a historical low turnout rate. And of course, Borisov's government didn't even get the overwhelming majority of the vote. It's eventually we're talking about a government that probably only has around 10% of voters from the country actually casting the ballot. Do you think that this will brew some sort of contempt and throw the country into maybe yet another wave of crisis?
Bulgarians are on one hand fed up with politics. On the other hand, I think that's why Borisov's move also in a sense is a logical one. He is aware that it doesn't need too much to happen so that people will go out on the streets. Not probably to support a particular political party, but because they're fed up with the way of doing politics. And this protest potential still, I think, is visible in Bulgaria, and in that sense, Borisov's steps are very careful and cautious in that respect, and we will see how that's going to turn out.
Definitely, yeah. It's a very interesting case study to look at here. Meanwhile, thank you so much for helping us unpack all this very complicated politics, and really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being with us on Eastern Express.
Thank you.
And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg announced that Hungary will not be blocking NATO's support to Ukraine. This agreement comes ahead of a crucial summit in Washington, where US and NATO allies are expected to devise a new system for providing constant and long-term security assistance and military training to Ukraine's armed forces.
During a press conference in Budapest with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, Stoltenberg stated that while Hungary will not contribute personnel or funds to the supporting efforts, it will not obstruct the alliance's initiatives, allowing other members to proceed. This move is seen as a compromise from Hungary, which has often been at odds with NATO and the European Union over their stance on the Ukraine conflict. Prime Minister Orban, known for his close ties with Russian President Vladimir Putin, has positioned himself as a peacemaker, advocating for a non-interventionist approach and labeling allies assisting Ukraine as a pro-war. His government's reluctance to join EU sanctions against Moscow and the delay in ratifying Sweden's NATO accession had raised concerns among Western governments. Stoltenberg's visit to Hungary is part of a broader effort to consolidate support within the alliance for increased aid to Ukraine's military. The agreement with Hungary marks a breakthrough, ensuring that NATO's decision-making process, which requires consensus among its members, is not hindered by a single ally's veto.
BIPOL, an organization of former Belarusian law enforcement officers who have sided with the opposition, has accused Russian President Vladimir Putin and Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko of plotting to dispatch saboteurs across the Belarusian border during the upcoming Euro 2024 football championship.
According to BIPOL, the operation is designed to disrupt the highly anticipated event by infiltrating it with individuals trained to subversive activities. This claim adds to the growing concerns over the security measures in place for the tournament, which is expected to draw thousands of fans from across Europe. The allegations come on the heels of a series of arrests made by Poland's internal security agency, where individuals suspected of sabotage activities were detained. BIPOL's statement has prompted a swift response from European security agencies, who are now working closely with the tournament organizers to reassess and reinforce the security protocols for Euro 2024.
The Azerbaijani Defense Ministry announced the completion of the withdrawal of Russian peacekeepers from the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh. This marks the end of the Russian military presence that was established in the fall of 2020 following an escalation in a long-standing conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan over the territory.
The Russian contingent's departure follows several months after Azerbaijan regained control of the region in a swift military offensive in September 2023, leading to the dissolution of the self-proclaimed Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. The withdrawal began in April and has been a point of contention, especially after Armenia accused the Russian forces of failing to intervene during Azerbaijan's offensive. The Armenian government has also taken steps to distance itself from Russian influence, including asking Russian forces to leave Yerevan's international airport and announcing it will officially leave the Russian-led Collective Security Treaty Organization. Armenia is now looking westward, considering an application for membership in the European Union, as it seeks to strengthen ties with Western countries amid the growing rift with Russia. The departure of Russian peacekeepers from Nagorno-Karabakh is a turning point in the region's history and could signal a shift in the balance of power in the South Caucasus.
And that's all on this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.